thank you very much, Marianne, and great to have you all here. And for any of you who know us, it's kind of nice to cover something that's a little more uplifting than kind of geopolitics and kind of the tensions in China, Russia, Iran. So this is a nice program. And I would say we have three incredible panelists. And honestly, we could have a 3-hour conversation with any one of them. So just, we normally finish about 8. We'll go a little bit longer, about maybe 8:10. And there is no particular order to any of this, but maybe just to help set the stage, my kind of thought was start with the ambassador, forget the big picture, Angela for the incredible idea. Most people don't get to meet a former national team player, let alone a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. And also, I think you were the second highest scorer at one of those World Cups or the Olympics for, yeah. So it's pretty awesome. I'm a big soccer fan, if you don't know. And then all of us here should be thanking Chris for the incredible work he has done. It shows you how hard it is, difficult it is. Since 2019, he's been the president of the Houston Host Committee. That Houston gets to be a host committee for World Cup is really incredible. I'm super, super excited. I've already entered the different lotteries to try to get tickets. The one thing I would say to any of you out there, even if you absolutely positively hate soccer, World Cups are a ton of fun. I've been in World Cup in Germany, in France. Even if you don't care about soccer, the games, whatever, just go. You'll have a good time. It is basically the world's biggest international party because it's everything before and up to and after the matches themselves. It's just a collection of people from all over the world, and most of them are good spirits, even if they've lost. So I'd say it's fun. But just to kick things off, John or Ambassador, maybe you could give us an idea of kind of a rough way we should be thinking about kind of sports diplomacy and a little bit maybe how it's evolved over time, and maybe your own kind of personal story. You have a long, distinguished career in the State Department, but also a fascinating aspect, fun aspect of it as relates to diplomacy related to sports.
Thank you, Ronan, and thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Why don't you take this one? Is it on?
Okay. Okay, is it better? All right. Thank you so much, Ronan. Ronan and I go way back, and he's correct. Usually we're talking about subjects that perhaps are a little more serious, possibly. But I do think sport can be really serious and important, too. I thought I would just kick off tonight's session with a little bit of a personal story about how I became involved as a government official in the world of sports. Obviously, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from Texas. I grew up overseas, so I was fortunate enough to play soccer in London and Amsterdam, and it really is the world's game. So I'm a fan, I'm a player. I've been a coach for a long time, going through the coaching badges from like Z. I think I'm up to B now, and I'm just about to get to that magical A pro if I ever make it. But it's a funny story. As a government official, I wanted to share with you how I became involved in sports diplomacy, even though back in the day, I'm old, we didn't have a term for it. I was on my very first assignment in Washington, D.C., a new officer at the State Department, doing duty on a late night shift. And I got a call that was somehow routed to me from State Department Operations Center. I think it was because I was duty officer for international organizations, and I think they probably thought, sport, that doesn't fit necessarily anywhere else, so we'll give it to the duty officer in that bureau. So I picked up the phone, and it was actually U.S. Soccer on the line. And after introducing themselves, they explained that there was a U.S. youth team playing in Cuba, of all places. And yeah, sport diplomacy, even though we didn't have a term for it, we were trying to do that even back then. But the reason they were calling was because a hurricane was approaching Cuba. And U.S. Soccer wanted the U.S. government to do something about it. Right. And yet, young, brash, ambitious officer, I said, hey, I love U.S. Soccer. Let me see what I can do. And I hung up the phone. The weather changed. Overnight, it moved in another direction. And I called them back when I came back on duty and told U.S. Soccer, see, I took care of it. And it's interesting. Just a few months later, Henry Kissinger, which is probably a name that's familiar to some of you in more serious conversations, he was actually the honorary chairman of U.S. Soccer at the time when the U.S. was preparing to host the first World Cup way back in the 90s, which is before some of you were born, no doubt. He actually wrote a letter. I have it on my wall at Texas A&M University, where I teach now, saying, hey, essentially, I'm paraphrasing. He doesn't say hey, but, U.S. government, this thing is coming, the World Cup. We're going to need a lot of U.S. support for this great event. And by the way, I know an officer who does amazing things. And we really would like him to be part of that effort. That caused some consternation with my bosses, by the way, that they thought I'd somehow lined this up, and I hadn't. But that's how I became director for government affairs for 2 wonderful years back in 1992. I even brought along my credentials. I fished these off my wall in my office, just to remind me that government and sport have been teammates for a very long time, if you think about it. And while I do believe the World Cup is the greatest event on earth, I do have to tip my hat to the ancient Greeks and the Olympics. And truly, sport and nation and government, what we now call sports diplomacy, has been a long-time partnership. People focus on the players appropriately in the game. There's a lot that goes on outside the white lines well before kickoff, years before kickoff, in terms of organizing something like a World Cup. And governments play a large role. And I'll be honest, I'm happy to answer any questions about some of the negative aspects of government involvement and the money involved in sports and the big business associated with it. Governments do use sport for purposes to burnish credentials, to improve their reputation, but hopefully also for positive outcomes such as better environment, better economic impact for cities and states and countries that host these events. But I don't know if you fully appreciate how much goes on, and I'll just give you a taste of it, and then obviously we have wonderful other panelists with me. You probably are not aware that governments have to guarantee to FIFA, which is the international organizing body for soccer, a whole host of guarantees on security, on things you may never think of, like medicine, things you may not think about in terms of financial controls, protocol. And think about it. Even with this World Cup coming up, we may have teams and federations coming from countries that we have no diplomatic relations with. And yet, we have guaranteed that we will host and welcome these teams and these federations, their fans, the players, so that we can all enjoy what truly is the world's best game, which I'm biased, is, I think, soccer. I want to stress that so much work goes on unseen, so that the people you want to see can actually get onto the field and play that game. And so I'm happy to talk in greater detail about what it takes behind the scenes to put on such an event. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the role, not just of the feds, the national government, but state, city. It really is a partnership, and it has to be for an effective, successful game. We're here in Houston, fantastic city. My wife and I have lived in Texas now 3 years. I know everything's bigger in Texas. I've learned that. I know it's going to be a fantastic celebration of the world's greatest game, but it's because you have a local organizing committee, you have a mayor, you have citizens, you who are caring deeply about ensuring this is a huge success. And then, of course, at the state level, national level, and even internationally, it is a team, and I believe in that. It's a partnership. And when it works well, you can have the most fantastic World Cup. I like to think, I'm biased, of course, because I was there then, right? The 94 World Cup helped ensure that we had a wonderful Women's World Cup a few years later, and that it has helped set the stage for what will be an absolutely fantastic World Cup next year. So that was opening remarks. I'll turn it back to Rick.
No, that was awesome. And I'm saying I'm going to go back and forth with all this. But I'm saying, Angela, it's really a pleasure to have you and kind of an honor to have you. You mentioned the '99 World Cup. That's I think the World Cup that really put women's soccer on the international stage. I remember following all those games, watching it in big crowds and bars. It was lots of fun back then. It's pretty cool to have actually a little bit after that, but one of the key U.S. players for a long period of time. You played in 2 Olympics. You played in 2 World Cups. Um, from a perspective as a player and as an individual, I'm sure growing up you never imagined this, but what is it like to play and represent your country? What's it like to represent the United States? And maybe beyond just the incredible honor of it and the joy of it, is it also kind of a degree of stress and the feeling like I can't screw up. I'm representing the United States. It's not just my college team anymore, or stuff like that. What was that whole process like?
You mean when the entire world is watching you publicly for the most intense moments of your life? That part of it, yeah. It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate experience. I think being a competitive athlete, and then individually just being a person who is constantly striving for excellence, constantly striving for mastery, to have the honor and the privilege to represent your country on the world stage is the ultimate experience, and probably unlike anything I will ever experience again. And, the ambassador talks about the work and what goes on behind the scenes to put on a spectacular event. And my first World Cup experience was 2003. And for those of you who remember or who don't know, that actually was hosted by the United States in response, because China was actually supposed to host that. But due to the outbreak of SARS, the United States was able to quickly put together the Women's World Cup in the United States. So, just kudos to everything that Chris and others are doing for what we know is going to be a spectacular event. And I think just looking at from a player's perspective, it seems a little bit more like ancient years ago. I think it is something that, the ambassador just alluded to. It brings people together. There's probably not another time outside of an Olympics or a World Cup, a sporting event, that would put so many different people and cultures in the same place to experience something much greater than ourselves. So to be able to be in an Olympic village, to be with other athletes who are the best of the best, and to then be able to witness that as a fan, to experience all of the work, all of the years of commitment, dedication, sacrifice, the adversity, the highs and lows, to see that put on a world stage in a pressure cooker environment, when the world is looking and watching. And that's why I say it's the ultimate experience.
Ambassador discussed it kind of some of it at the national level, but the crucial local level, for any of you might recognize Chris, he was president of the Houston Dynamo for many years, president of the Houston World Cup host committee for Houston since 2019 or so. I think it gives you an idea of how long and difficult the process is. Can you describe kind of the ins and outs and maybe a lot of things we don't think about of how much it took for Houston to become one of those 10 or 11 cities that could be a host city? And then on the positive side of it, what are some of the big potential payoffs for the city with the World Cup next year?
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. Let me talk a little bit about the bid process and how Houston became a host city. So the World Cup was awarded to North America back in 2018, and it was awarded to the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It was the first time, by the way, that a World Cup is ever being held in 3 countries. It's been held in 2 countries before, South Korea and Japan back in 2002, and the last Women's World Cup was in Australia and New Zealand. But this is the first time ever that it's been hosted in 3 countries. And to the ambassador's point, can you imagine the level of government intervention and collaboration that goes into making this all work? But when the World Cup was awarded in 2018 to North America, the cities in Canada and the cities in Mexico were already decided upon. In Mexico, it's Monterrey, Mexico City, and Guadalajara. In Canada, it was originally Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. Montreal dropped out. But the U.S. cities, there were supposed to be 10 U.S. cities, was up for grabs. It was a competitive bid process. So I came in 2019 after 13 years with the Dynamo and Dash, and was asked to lead the efforts to go out and try to bring the World Cup to Houston. And I don't know, I didn't know how to do that, to be honest with you. There's no playbook for that. So we went to work, we put together a plan, and we started to think about what we needed to do to convince FIFA to bring the World Cup to Houston. When it was last here in 1994, Houston was not a host city. Dallas was, but Houston was not. But what we realized very quickly was something that, for those of you who are from Houston and spend a lot of time working on Houston, probably realize is that FIFA didn't really have an impression of Houston one way or another. Not a good one, not a bad one. They really didn't know who we were, for being honest, right? FIFA's located out of Zurich, and we realized very quickly that, sure, they understood what Dallas was all about for some reason. They had impressions of Miami and, of course, New York and LA, even Denver, the pretty mountains in the back. But Houston, we had a lot of work to do to convince FIFA that this was an appropriate city to bring the World Cup to. What was great was that we have no weaknesses. Houston's hosted more major sporting events than any of our competition at the time since 2004. We've got great international airports, award-winning airports. We've got tremendous stadium and NRG Park with some representatives who are here tonight. And it's not just the stadium, it's the arena that's next to it, it's the center that's next to it, it's the retractable roof. We got an incredible package there. Our stadium actually happens to be located in Houston. And that might sound silly to you, but the Dallas Stadium's actually in Arlington. The New York Stadium's actually in New Jersey. San Francisco Stadium's actually in Santa Clara, right? So being in Houston and you know, centrally located made a big deal. So lots of great things about Houston. We had no weaknesses whatsoever. You know, the internationalism of our city, the diversity of our city, all these things really added up to we have the full package. There's no weaknesses, but we had to convince FIFA of this. We had to go out and we had to tell the story about our city and about why Super Bowls and Final Fours and college football championships and other major sporting events, Copa America, Gold Cup, you name it, all-star games continue to come to Houston. We need to talk about the spirit of our city and how we mobilize and come together to make big things happen during good and bad times. And we had to do that, by the way, during COVID when people weren't traveling. So imagine trying to sell a city and all of these things that I'm talking about via Zoom. It was a real difficult challenge. But finally things opened up and people started traveling again. And we caught a break in October of 2021. FIFA was making visits now out. COVID had allowed travel to happen again. And the FIFA brought a delegation of about 80 people to Houston to look at everything, the stadium, the practice facilities, the fan festival sites, the hotels, the airports, you name it. And it happened to be on the same day that the Astros were playing the Braves in Game 1 of the World Series. So the only way that game was taking place that day was if it was the Astros versus Braves. If the Dodgers had made it, the game would have been in LA. So we caught a real fortunate break that on the one day that FIFA came to Houston, we were able to take them to a major sporting event. That night didn't go very well for the Astros, for those of you who might recall. But FIFA really didn't know the difference between home plate and foul pole. You know, they're from Europe for the most part, and they're footballers, as we call them. But it was really important for us to be able to show them our city in action and show a big event and show the enthusiasm and the excitement and the operations and the logistics and all the great stuff that went into it. And so long story short, maybe not so short, huh? Talking for a minute. We won. At the end of the day, we convinced FIFA that Houston was an appropriate city to host the FIFA World Cup. In June of 2022, the announcement took place, and Houston became one of 11 U.S. cities. It was really originally going to be 10 to become a host. And not only did we win to become a host city, we got the third most number of matches out of all the cities. We have 7 matches coming to Houston next summer to host the World Cup. So yeah, that was a very interesting process. I think my book will be a lot longer than what I just talked about here, but it's a great honor for Houston to be hosting this event. I'll just say some things for those of you who may not be familiar with the World Cup, and then I'll turn it back. But this is the largest sporting event in the history of the world. For anybody who doesn't know that, we're talking about, like I said, 3 countries playing host, 16 cities playing host, 48 nations competing. That's up from 32 from the last World Cup in Qatar. And there will be 104 matches across a 39-day period. So can you imagine the logistics that goes into this? And to help put this into a little bit of perspective, I'll share some broadcast viewing numbers. I'm guessing a lot of people in this audience watched the Super Bowl this past February, Philadelphia versus Kansas City. It was the most watched Super Bowl in the history of the world. 125 million people watched it. 125 million. The last World Cup final between Argentina and France had 1.5 billion people watch it across the world. Okay. Each match from Houston, right down the street here, will have 200 million viewers. So every single match we have here has 75 million more broadcast audience around the world than a Super Bowl. We've got 7 of those. That equals 1.4 billion viewers. So the scale of this event is incredible. And these are all things that make it the largest sporting event in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The scale of it, the numbers. Ambassador, just to maybe kind of follow up a little bit. Chris was touching upon it. The infrastructure every year, something like the Olympics or the World Cup gets bigger and bigger. We've expanded now to 48 teams. You need more hotels. You need bigger stadiums. You need better transportation. For a lot of countries, the World Cup's probably gotten too expensive to host. But there are some countries, even knowing they will lose money, perhaps lose billions of dollars, still will throw their hat in the ring, still want to host it. Can you explain kind of what is the thinking, the trade-off, say, between a country saying, we know we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars getting ready for this thing, we don't know what we'll get it back, but why they still think it's worth doing?
Yeah, Ronan, it's a great question. I think Chris has pointed out just how big an event this is. It truly is an event that people stop and they go to the cafe or they go to their home or they bring people over. Everyone watches the World Cup, no matter where you are, what country, how well off you are. People find a way. They bring the TVs to the top of the mountain just so they can get the game. And there are benefits that matter for the World Cup, and that brings real benefit to the people of the country that hosts it. That's one major reason. I could spew the economic statistics at you. For the economic benefit for the city of Houston and the state of Texas in the United States is in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of people coming, staying in the hotels, visiting the restaurants in this fantastic city, doing everything that people do when they travel. That's a real economic benefit that matters, and it's one major reason why even a country that may wonder, they know it's expensive to put this on, but they also understand the economic return on that investment, which is why one reason. I think also, to be honest with you, it's a huge honor to host the World Cup. Countries compete, just like the cities do, to be hosts to this great event. And I think many countries want that international exposure and recognition. There are many countries in the world that people may have doubted, their ability to host something like the World Cup. You can think Qatar, for example, or maybe even Saudi Arabia in the future. Heck, even South Africa. People doubted the ability for a country to organize an event such as the World Cup. I've been to almost every World Cup since 1990. I'm that old, right? And I'll tell you, I was skeptical too sometimes. But the World Cup is amazing in terms of unifying a country so that everyone comes together to put on such a great event. And sure, we could talk about sports washing and countries do this to burnish their reputation. Heck yes. And it does. I'll tell you also, back in 1991, when the U.S. had won and, we're starting to gear up in 92 for an event that's still years away, there were doubters. There were skeptics. America is not a soccer nation. There's no culture of soccer here. It's too hot in Orlando to have these games. America's infrastructure isn't sufficient to accommodate all these visitors. They won't be able to get to our wonderful stadiums. Well, you know what? More people attended that World Cup than ever before. more people watched that World Cup than ever before. And I think it proved that this country is a soccer nation. And it's led to such great things as the league, men and women, the opportunity to host the World Cup again with our neighbors, Mexico and Canada. So I understand some of the skepticism about how countries win the right to host the World Cup, but I've seen the benefit as well. And I've been to many of these hosts where there were doubts about the capability or the ability. I too was skeptical at times, but I've seen with my own eyes the unifying effect of the World Cup, the great passion that fans bring to the World Cup. It is a celebration of sport. And, in terms of dollars and the economic return, it is important. And it will be a wonderful, I think, opportunity for Houston to showcase all of Houston, not just the game and the stadium, but this wonderful city and the great state of Texas as well.
And Angela, just to kind of bring it from your international career, as Marianne noted, you played over 100 caps, means a time where you're playing representing your national team all over the world. Professionally, you've played with players from all over the world. You came to Houston last year to become the president of Women's Soccer, basically the president of Dash, the Dynamo of the Dash, or Chris could talk about it as well. But could you, and then Chris, if you'll follow up on it, can you talk about the internationalization kind of soccer in terms of the number of American men and women going to play other parts of the world, and then also players from all over the world coming to play in the United States and maybe Houston in particular?
Sure. I think one of the most incredible parts about being in Houston, and this is via Los Angeles, where I felt where LA was very diverse, but I think there's a nuance here, which is the community itself seems close here in Houston from my experience so far, which I think has been really incredible. And although Chris was more business operations with Dynamo and Dash, part of what I'm excited about with this World Cup is from a recruitment perspective, it's not necessarily an easy sell just to say, hey, come to Houston. In terms of when we're talking to both domestic players as well as international players. And so it's really when you're able to be here to experience the richness of the community of Houston, what the city has to offer, that I think people can really get excited. And so we see right now, and I'm speaking about this because it's something we're talking about on a daily basis in terms of recruitment and getting players here from international locations. But what can we offer is incredible because it can speak to so many different cultures. Right now in our league, we are seeing an influx because of women's football globally is hitting a critical turning point in terms of raising of transfer fees. We're now seeing the most money offered for players switching from clubs from here domestically to abroad. Typically, it's the WSL in England. $1.5 million, I think, is the most we've seen so far, which we've hit recently. And succinctly, 3 players in a row hitting that 1 million plus mark. And so we're seeing the raise of transfer fees. We're seeing the raise of salaries for players. And so now we're seeing some of our top players in our league having opportunities to play abroad as well. It's not something where I feel necessarily concerned because I think this is very much a testament to what we're doing in this league domestically and how we're developing talent and that they are being recognized in a global market now. But I think this is a real fantastic opportunity when we talk about displaying our city to attract even more talent here domestically in our country, but also for the city of Houston.
And then Chris, obviously you have deep experience in it. Could you kind of discuss that from the men's side in terms of professional soccer in the United States? And then maybe just to follow up on what you discussed before, can you discuss how everything will break down in terms of Houston? It was interesting. We were talking before the program, what responsibilities you have, the city has, FIFA has when we host next year.
Yeah. So soccer's the world's game, and it's played around the world. If baseball, we've got the best baseball league. Football, we got the best football league. We got the best basketball league, best hockey league. But we don't have the best soccer leagues. Why? Because they're new. Major League Soccer started in 1996, whereas other soccer leagues around the world are 100 plus years old, and the clubs are 100 plus years old. National Women's Soccer League started in 2013. It's a little over a decade old. So we are building something here. But my point is the best soccer leagues around the world have players from all over the world. It's not just from one country or from the home country. It's players in and out. So the evolution of Major League Soccer is that back in the day, most of the players were American, and we weren't bringing in players from other countries, and our players weren't going to play in other countries. And now, as the game has grown in the United States, and as our league has grown to one of the top 5 to 10 leagues in the world, you're looking at players coming and going from all over the world. So you look at the rosters of the MLS teams; they're very diverse, with not just Americans, but from players from all over the world. And now you're seeing some of the best American players also go play across the globe. So it's really been the maturation of soccer in this country, of the leagues in this country, where we've kind of started to catch up with the rest of the world. And the trend is, that we're more like the other leagues around the world, perhaps, than where Major League Soccer was 20 years ago. So that's really been a dramatic, accelerated growth over the last 25 years. Major League Soccer was born in 1996 as a result of the World Cup being here in 1994. In order for the U.S. to host the World Cup in 94, they had to agree to create a domestic league. So that league came in 1996. It's had its struggles over the time. I worked in Major League Soccer for 19 years, but that league has allowed teams like the Dynamo and now 30 different teams across the U.S. and Canada to really help develop the sport in this country. When I grew up, I didn't have a Major League Soccer player to aspire to be, right? So I watched the Yankees. I grew up in Connecticut. The Giants, the Jets, the Patriots, right? The Rangers, the Knicks. We didn't watch soccer. And now players growing up have a Houston Dynamo player, a Houston Dash player to look up to aspire, to get a selfie with, to get an autograph with, to dream of playing on that next level. So it's really evolved quite a bit since the last World Cup. And now the question is, what does this World Cup do to even further accelerate the game to the next level? So I think there was a second part to your question.
I thought it was really interesting. You were discussing something I really thought about, but how divisions and responsibility for different things break down in terms of within the city. For one thing, you mentioned in the United States, unlike in Mexico or Canada, it is not run at a national level. You have to work at a county level, a city level, and then coordinate with FIFA. How is that process all put together?
Yeah. So I also want to add to some of the things that Ambassador was saying about the economic impact. So the estimated economic impact of the World Cup to the Houston region is $1.5 billion with a B. So the Super Bowl was here in 2017. After that Super Bowl was said and done, they did an actual economic impact study on the real numbers, not a projection. And the economic impact of that event was $347 million. That was one game on a Sunday with about a week's worth of events. Okay. We're going to have 7 matches over 21 days, and we're going to have a fan festival that runs for 39 days. So and this is the World Cup, which is larger than the Super Bowl, and it's also a decade later. So with all of those things combined, it's easy to compute how you get to a $1.5 billion economic impact. And that is the return that's one of the returns to our region for hosting this event. So to tie into what you're saying, the organization that I oversee is a nonprofit organization. We were basically appointed by the county and the city through the Harris County Houston Sports Authority to put on this event, to hold the contract with FIFA. That contract obligates our city, our county, our community to do lots of stuff. That stuff is very, very expensive to put on. Renovations to NRG Stadium. We actually have to build a grass field into NRG Stadium, which is no inexpensive task. All of the safety and security, the transportation, the airports, the practice facilities, all of these things we have to do. What's great about this is in the United States, we don't have to build anything. So the ambassador was talking about previous World Cups in other countries, South Africa, Qatar, Brazil. you name it. They had to build stadiums from scratch. But we have beautiful stadiums and infrastructure here, like NRG Park. So we don't have to make those investments. So the return on an investment is much easier to receive from this economic impact. So the economic impact's easy to point to. The other thing to point to is the impressions for our city. Sports helps elevate cities. I mentioned before that each one of these matches will be viewed by 200 million people worldwide. There's also billions and billions of other impressions that'll be received by our city through media, social media, you name that. I told you that when FIFA started talking to us in 2019, they really didn't understand Houston. So this event is a platform for which we can get billions of impressions and help everybody understand that we are the fourth, about to be third largest city in the United States, and all the great things that go on here. So we hold this contract. We don't get any of the revenue from the event. That all goes to FIFA, the ticket sales, the parking, the food and beverage, the broadcast rights, all that, you name it. So our job here is to manage this, the expenses in this, for the good of Houston at the end of the day. So that's the task that we have in order, and it takes all kinds of stakeholders around the city to help pull that off.
And I have a lot of great questions here. And all three of you, obviously, feel free to jump in at any of them. Some questions, there's an audience member's name, which I'll say it was there. So if you didn't put it on there, that's fine. And some people addressed to a specific panelist. But most of these are just wide open for any of y'all, because you might have seen it at different levels. From both a political and social perspective, have any of you had or observed a specific relationship with someone from another country bloom because of sports? Just kind of an interesting question. You guys, you've all seen it at many different levels, but is there any kind of anything that comes to mind, or kind of a nice story or something to think about? Any of you? Bloom, just kind of was sports kind of the touchstone for a relationship at a personal level, or maybe you've seen it at an international level, diplomatic level, or just the kind of team to team, anything like that that comes to mind?
I don't have a specific example that's coming to mind, but I think sports is a connector, really, in a lot of different ways, and in the World Cup in particular is a connector. It's going to bring together people from all ages, all walks of life, all countries, and you guys will see this in Houston next year. It's going to be a happy place. We're going to have literally 500,000 plus visitors coming to Houston who are here to enjoy themselves, to have a good time, to celebrate soccer, and so there's so many different ways that sports unites people. Just think sometimes even when bad things happen in our country, unfortunately, sports becomes the moment in time where we pull people back together. We help heal. So there's so many real benefits to sports. It's one of the reasons why we want to bring major sporting events to Houston. It's great to see all the great athletes, the superstars, the talent, and have these awesome memories from the events in the stadium. But at the end of the day, it is this positive impact that we can create through sports that is the actual reason why we do this.
Yeah, I'll jump in with a few personal anecdotes. I was in Rome back in 1990 when the U.S. played Italy in the Olympic Stadium there. My wife and I were up in the cheap seats, and we were surrounded by Italian fans. And they had, Italian fans can be passionate about football and a little skeptical, at the time of anyone else playing anywhere near as well as Italy can. And yet our, new, upstart American men's national team held their own and actually did fairly well against one of the world's powers in football. And so the people around us, kind of, you Americans, you don't know anything about this game and what have you. And we're trying to understand each other. My Italian is pretty non-existent. But the great thing about sport? You don't need translation. Everyone can understand, the game. And people appreciate the effort and, of course, the result, too. But the U.S. held its own, as I said. And there was a respect there that was won during the course of that game, and we became friendly with people just sitting next to us who probably at the start of the game, didn't really think we should be there. Another country, another example. We all know that Iran is a particular focus in terms of geopolitics and their relationship or not with the United States. But I've actually had the opportunity at numerous World Cups to be part of that group, if you will, that's had to manage that issue in terms of making sure that the Iranian players can come, be safe, and play. And, you know, there's a tradition in soccer that I think is absolutely fantastic. And you see it on TV when they exchange the shirts, right, after a game. But just that gesture of coming together, two countries, you know, obviously they're playing their hearts out for Iran or for the United States. But at the end of the game, and the same in the stands, actually, that the TV doesn't necessarily show because the focus is appropriately on the field, on the pitch, that coming together, even for countries that, you know, may have a, you know, complicated history, no real diplomatic relations. Sport, as you said, can be a connector, a unifier, and a really powerful force for good. So I've witnessed a few times like that. And I'll give you another example that I do hope American fans can pick up on. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Japanese national teams play, but their fans bring garbage bags to the stadium, and they help the stadium clean up, win or lose. It's just the Japanese tradition. So, you know, we too can learn and benefit, I think, from some of the experiences like that when other countries, other teams come and play here in the United States.
And I would just say, from just an individual at a fan level, one thing I found fascinating, I went to the World Cup in Germany. And again, it's an international party. It was four of us. I just finished my MBA. I'm Irish. I moved here to the US when I was a kid, but it was an Irish American guy, a Texan, a South African, and another really good friend of mine from Costa Rica. Went over there, have a great time. And I heard some version of this from dozens of Germans. And occasionally I can pretty easy just chat to anybody here or there or whatever. But at World Cups, people are talking to everybody. And I still remember distinctly, I heard different versions of it. When we were walking around Munich at night, it was actually after the opening match. And there's this older German man walking around with this big, huge, scary looking dog. And he comes up and starts talking to us. And he said, "This is so wonderful." He said, it took decades, but I can feel proud to be German again. Because for a lot of them, they're thinking, we're still like, you know, understandably what happened in World War II. And he said, it's nice to actually see Germans have pride in their country. And he said, the other thing is amazing. He said, if it wasn't for the World Cup, I would never be talking to you. and many other Germans said the same thing. Like, it made us kind of a little more open, a little more friendly, a little more willing to be maybe a little less Northern European, maybe more Southern European, and chat with people. So I would just say that at a, you know, at a personal level. And this is, you know, maybe just getting back to the logistics of it. Obviously, Chris, you probably know the most of it, but there are a lot of questions about in terms of how it will be hosted in Houston. Eric asks, you know, what was the most unexpected obstacle for hosting the securing the World Cup in Houston? And then, you know, Roman asks, related to that, will the Houston airport renovation be finished in time? And then someone else, there's no name on it, but said, in terms of lodging and accommodation in Houston, what is the expectation or the kind of capacity like now?
Okay. There wasn't really a huge obstacle other than the one I mentioned before. It was really, like I said, we had everything you need to host this event. So we weren't trying to scramble to put something together. It was really just about communicating our story and making sure that FIFA understood Houston. So that was really, but we recognized that early. We made a concerted effort to focus on that, and all of that work paid off. So I think that was the biggest obstacle in that. The airports are going to be done for the most part. There's still going to be some work going on at Terminal B, but the international airport is scheduled to be terminal is scheduled to be done by January, and we've been working very closely with the airports on that. They understand the importance of being ready and you know, welcoming the world. Like I said, we have a lot of people that are going to be coming through our airports, and I think there was one other.
Yeah, I mean, just the overall logistics of it, hotel capacity, transportation.
Yeah. Again, the good news is we have plenty of hotel capacity. Again, when you know, was one of the reasons why we were effectively won is that we're able to say we have enough hotel rooms here to accommodate the massive fan bases that will be coming through. So they will be full. They will be full from Galveston to the Woodlands down to Sugarland, Pearland, you name it. If you have an Airbnb, you're probably in a really good spot as well. But we definitely have the capacity to handle the crowds. We didn't have to build hotels or get crazy and bring in a cruise ship or anything like that to find incremental space. So luckily that's in place here in Houston.
And then just a list logistics at a national level, maybe Ambassador, there are two questions kind of in that vein. Sabine asks, for the World Cup, are there any countries that would say be forbidden to travel to the United States? And how does FIFA deal with, those kind of diplomatic difficulties, I suppose, perhaps between countries? And Linda asks, do you anticipate any problems with visa and immigration for people coming from players coming from countries that the United States may not have best relations with?
Yeah, I really appreciate to use a different sport, softball questions like immigration and visas. I'll start with the security side. Governments give guarantees to FIFA as part of the bidding process to win the right to host the World Cup. And one of the key guarantees, of course, is if a nation qualifies for the World Cup, they will be able to play at the World Cup. That's fundamental. And I'm certain that will be honored. We've had the FIFA president multiple times in the White House, visiting with President Trump. There is a task force that's situated at the White House, led by Andrew Giuliani and then Carlos Cordero from the soccer world. So you have that partnership again between the political and sporting worlds here in the United States, focused on the World Cup next year. There's been supplemental in Congress, a bill to fund not just the running of the government, but also some of the security costs associated, not just to protect the teams, but protect everyone, including yourselves, so that this is a completely safe and secure and welcoming environment in all of our host cities. The State Department that I used to work for 35 years is pulling out all the stops. In some of the countries where there's already high visa demand, like places like Brazil, Mexico, and others, the wait times are coming down. I'll be honest with you, it's a challenge. I think everyone's trying to communicate that if you're interested in coming, and we know a lot of people are, start early. We've already talked about how long it takes to put on a World Cup. We were trying to get the word out that, if your country's qualified, apply for your visa, not just for your tickets. You need both. And so those wait times are coming down, but it is, to be frank, a challenge. And so our government is working on that. I don't have a crystal ball. I do recall back in, I don't know when it was before the 94 World Cup, I went all the way out to Qatar. All right, so this is decades before they hosted the World Cup, but they had the regional qualifying tournament then. And we had countries like Iraq, Iran, North Korea, all potentially on the verge of all qualifying. And sure, it caused some, head scratching as to what would happen and what we would have to do. But we were committed, and that's why we went, to talk to these countries, to talk to these teams, to work out the arrangements to make sure that they could participate in the World Cup. Another interesting anecdote about 1994, a country you may not think we have a difficulty with, but England didn't qualify in 94, right? The home of soccer, if you believe, the EPL. We spent a lot of time working with the English, the government, the FA, because back then we had hooligans and there was violence in many games in the United Kingdom, and we were concerned about that. So we took a lot of precautions to make sure that it would be a very safe environment. In the end, England didn't qualify. And so we're doing, and I'm confident the U.S. government at a national level, but together with our state and local partners, everything that is needed to protect everyone at the game. And I mean not just the visitors, the fans, but also the players. One thing that people may not know about the State Department is we have an arm called Diplomatic Security, and they're responsible for the protection of our national teams, sporting teams. So we always have State Department agents in the stadiums, at the training facilities, helping to protect our treasure, our best players, no matter where they play. And that includes here in the United States.
Well, it's a great, and Angela, I think you're by far at all levels experienced at best for this question. But Chris, obviously, with your deep experience as an executive for the Dynamo and Dash, you want to touch on it and follow up as well. There's not a name on this, but someone asked, how can men and women's national teams identify and develop top talent at a young age without relying on our current system that often only has access to players from certain socioeconomic backgrounds?
Yeah. Softball.
Yeah. It's a work in progress. That's the best answer. And there's no straight answer for that one. Chris is chuckling because very much knows that's true. And I think it is about looking at how our models, our systems are different here domestically than they are in the rest of the world. Pay to play is a very real model, which is not necessarily inclusive. It does exclude a large group of population of young people who don't have access to safe playing fields, equipment. And when you look at the opportunities for recruitment of talent and identification, a lot of that is happening in club environments and specialized locations, tournaments, and the opportunities are actually different a little bit from the men's pathway to pro versus the women's pathway to pro. And I think being able to break that down as well is it's a beast, and it's not been solved yet. But I think by working collaboratively with the federation as well as youth organizations and making sure that we're doing more to access or provide access and opportunities to those who typically don't have it, I think is part of it. The World Cup, the exposure that young people will be able to now see the sport, I think is another huge thing. There's much more visibility now in the women's game that just wasn't there before. You see young girls and young boys with women's national team jerseys because they see them. But being able to fall in love with the sport, I think that is where I have stories of former teammates watching the World Cup for the first time. And that's when they fell in love with the sport and then became a player themselves. So first and foremost, it's the access. It's being able to put these world events very close and tangible so that young people can start to fall in love with the sport as well.
Yeah, I mean, I won't add too much to that other than there's just a massive cultural difference between how we approach sports and youth sports and the development of athletes here, in particular on the soccer side, compared to how it's done internationally. And there is no simple answer to that. It's going to be a long-term process. U.S. Soccer has been trying to solve this forever. Maybe we've made some inroads. Certainly having pro leagues in our country is a good start, in these pro leagues having youth academies now. But it's, like I said, we have a cultural battle to overcome here in terms of how we're developing athletic talent, and it's quite different than Belgium, Holland, Germany, lots of places around the world. So it's good. No easy answer to that one.
More softball questions for you, Ambassador. And I will say we were actually looking to do something with Astros. We'll probably do that maybe in early 2026. I should note what is equally awesome for Houston is one of only 4 host cities for the World Baseball Classic, was hosted next year. I think it's one of only 2 American cities. It'll be hosted in Tokyo, Miami, Houston, and actually I think San Juan, Puerto Rico, I think is the 4th city. So very cool for Houston. But yeah, in line with more softball questions, Ambassador, 2 questions that this one doesn't have a name, but says, can you describe the extent to which corruption plays a role in sports diplomacy? And then Leonardo, and I think it's Leonardo, who I believe, it's the one I'm thinking of, is Brazilian. So he's not knocking on Brazil. He is Brazilian himself, I think. Leonardo asks, past World Cups in Brazil has had huge corruption scandals. How does the U.S. mitigate anything related to that, and then kind of in line.
2 questions.
Two. Well, they're both about corruption, the issues of corruption, and then and kind of related to that side of things. Beverly asks, can you talk a little bit more about the legacy programs for human rights and maybe sustainability in the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, important questions, and I'll do my best to try to answer them. I just want to go back to the last question, though, because you can tell from my accent, as I said at the top, I'm not from Texas. People wonder if I'm even from the United States because I grew up overseas. And the model is completely different. I came back to the U.S. for university and I played at college. And my experience was very different from my teammates. I first grew up a kid in London and then moved to Amsterdam. Great soccer countries, right? And we would every day play soccer every single day in the street, in the park, put 2 shirts down and those would be goals. And then because of the network of the league and the teams, there'd be enough opportunity for everyone to play the game. And you might play for Alkmaar or AZ or Ajax youth, but you might be on the Z team or the D team, but everyone had the opportunity to play at whatever level was appropriate with really good facilities and training, so that if you were good enough and determined enough and had the right opportunity, you could rise up through the ranks. And even when, you met with your friends, you'd be talking about soccer, and it was part of life, which was different than I think the experience of many players in the United States back when I played, which was a while ago. But the issue of corruption is real. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We've heard some of the economic numbers that are associated with something as large and important as the World Cup. And as I said, I too was a skeptic about some of the processes when certain countries were awarded the rights to host the World Cup, typically because the U.S. didn't get that opportunity to do so. But I've also seen some of the benefit of soccer being hosted by places that did not have that opportunity before. And I think that is important. I said quite clearly that people were skeptical about the United States being able, or why should the U.S. be given the right to host the World Cup? It's so important, and America's not a soccer country. And I think we proved the doubters wrong. I do think there was a credible legacy that resulted from the U.S. hosting the World Cup. We talked about the establishment of our national leagues, the opportunity then to host a women's World Cup for the very first time, and the opportunities, that gave our youth to aspire to play the world's most beautiful game. And no doubt, I work in government. Corruption, exists. It does. I do think because of pressure being put on by concerned citizens, by non-governmental organizations, by the very host cities, they don't want a black eye either. They want to demonstrate that there's going to be a real social and economic benefit for hosting these games. I was, to be honest, and I've said this publicly, so I don't mind saying it again, I was skeptical about the ability of Qatar, or whether Qatar should be allowed to host the World Cup. I wasn't sure I was going to go, but I went because I wanted to see with my own eyes what took place. And no doubt, some of the conditions in terms of the building of those stadiums, which fortunately we don't have to worry about in this country, there were some legitimate concerns. But also, equally honest, Qatar did an amazing job in putting together a fabulous event. And the hope is that some of that good in terms of the social conditions there have improved because of their ability to host the World Cup. So it's not an easy thing to pull together such an event. Corruption does exist in the world of sport. And I would say the world of sport, not just soccer. And also I would add, having lived in many countries as a diplomat, corruption exists in most countries. It's not exclusively related to the world of soccer.
Plenty of it here. Yeah.
So that would be my few comments about that. I understand the challenge. I truly do. But I do think there's some incredible benefits as well when you have the opportunity to host something as important as the World Cup.
Great. And before, I just want to kind of give you, all three of you, a last kind of chance to close out. But just getting back to kind of some specifics and logistics related to Houston and FIFA. Chris, I think you're probably the best person for these questions. I'll just put them together. Well, one is Gordana asks, is there a committee that we can contact if we're interested in volunteering? And then related to the games, there's not a name on this one, but said, is there a percentage of tickets set aside for Houstonians at NRG Stadium, beyond, say, the FIFA lottery system? And Hiron asks, related question, is there a trick to get tickets? So.
As to the volunteer question, which is the easiest of them all, you can go to our website, which is fwc26houston.com, and there's information there on how one can register to become a volunteer. We need 5,200 volunteers to pull off this event. We have received 35,000 applications in 3 weeks to be volunteers. So actually, we need people to help us interview volunteers if you want to do that. But yeah, you can go on the website, and there's actually, it's a pretty intense application that one needs to fill out. It's actually the FIFA volunteer program that we execute locally. So it's their template that you have to fill out. As to tickets, FIFA controls all the ticketing. We as a host committee do not control the ticketing. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any system that reserves tickets for Houstonians or anything like that. I believe that all. I don't know that for a fact. That's my belief, and I also believe that everybody is subject to the same process by which to get tickets. And right now, if you have a Visa card till tomorrow, you can go on and you have to go to FIFA.com/tickets. You have to fill out a form to get a FIFA identification number. With that number, you can then go register for the Visa pre-sale draw. And then if you're lucky, you'll be randomly selected to go into a window in October where you can go in and purchase. Okay. If you don't have a Visa card, there'll be another window like that down the road where you can use any credit card, and then it'll be the same type of system. And then there'll be another type of thing like that. But you just got to stay in touch with FIFA.com/tickets for all the different ways that one can get tickets to this event. It's clearly a bit of a challenge, but that's because this event is such high demand. When the Visa presale started last week, and the first 12 hours, there was 1.5 million people who registered for tickets. So.
And before, just kind of last remarks, just to follow up, Marianne mentioned it before. We'd love to see you at any and all of our events. We're always adding new events daily. Literally, was working out details with regards to Secretary Pompeo's people yesterday and today. But just to give you an idea of some in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Next Thursday, we're hosting retired Admiral John Kirby. You might recognize him. He was a longtime Pentagon spokesperson, press secretary for Pentagon, also a spokesperson for the National Security Council for the White House. Worked during under and for, I'd say, both President Biden and President Obama. About 2 weeks after that, we're hosting at a luncheon. Make sure there's a luncheon on Tuesday, October 7th. We're hosting President Trump's first CIA director and the 70th Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. So look out for that. Be very interesting as well. And then actually, just coincidentally, it's a colleague of Ambassador Hennessy Nyland's. October 13th, we're hosting John Sherman, who's the dean of the Bush School at Texas A&M University. He is the former chief information officer for United States intelligence community, and before that for the United States Department of Defense. So that one of these people, most of what he says, I probably won't understand. But that'll be for a program about how AI, cyber, quantum developments are reshaping U.S. intelligence and U.S. national security. So just here's a good question, kind of to maybe give any kind of lasting, kind of remarks or anything you'd maybe like the audience to leave you with. Let's go down the line, but Ambassador, if you all just say whatever comes to mind. There's a name on this, but somebody asked, do you believe this event could be the first step in unifying this country, or maybe at least helping it to heal somewhat?
I mean, a great question. I've served as a diplomat for 35 years and 3 years now in Texas at Texas A&M. I believe in the power of sport. I've seen it and the positive outcomes from people coming together. And I don't mean necessarily just soccer. You know, I'm biased. I love soccer. I think it's the most beautiful game. You know, really simple at one level, but really hard at another. But it does bring people together. It needs no translation. You know, it doesn't matter where you're from, what you do. Everyone can enjoy the game. And so I'm a believer, but I've seen it here in the United States and in many countries around the world, the positive difference that soccer can bring. So I do think it can be a unifying force and a power for good, even with all of the things that possibly we talk about in terms of sport washing and corruption and some of the concerns, obviously, we have with a mega event like the World Cup. But fundamentally, you know, I think sport is good for your health, it's good for your mind, and it's great for bringing people together.
I 100% agree with the ambassador. I think there is an incredible power in sport. I was a part of a sports envoy program with the Department of State, and it was such an incredible experience to go around the world and go into a country, not be able to speak the language, start juggling a soccer ball, and all of a sudden 10 little kids just surrounding me, and we start communicating through the power of sport and through that soccer ball. I do believe that this is an opportunity for healing because of how it brings people together. We have experienced that. We have historical events and experiences that have shown that and have proven that in different political climates. And so I do believe that this is an opportunity to find joy, to find peace, and to really use something outside of ourselves that's fun and exciting to bring us together.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, there's going to be numerous legacies that are created by this World Cup and long-lasting positive impacts. But we could all hope and be most optimistic that that would be the greatest legacy of them all, if this could serve as a unifier and help bring people together.
And will we all please join me in thanking our three incredible panelists? And it was excellent. And to all of us, go USA next year, the World Cup 2026, and go Houston.